Welcome to episode 3 of CPA to CFO. My name is Mike Whitmire. I'm co-founder and CEO of Flowcast. And today we have Lee Raimundo with us for the podcast. I'm really excited to have Lee here today. A little fun fact about Lee, he was our interim CFO for about a 4-month period. Lee is a killer CFO and did a lot of great things for us. Unfortunately, for some reason, I could not recruit him to join Flowcast full time. He's moved on to a different opportunity, but I think so highly of Lee that I asked him to be on the podcast today because I think you have a fascinating story. I really enjoyed working with you. I think you're a stellar CFO, and so really excited to have you on today. So let's kick it off with my icebreaker questions here to try to get to know you a little bit. Outside of work, so like television shows, what do you like? What was the last thing you binged?
Sure. So, okay, I'm gonna throw out my nerd credentials here. I just finished the reboot of Battlestar Galactica from 2004. That's all we need to say about that.
All right.
And I just recently started to pick up watching The Boys, which is an Amazon show about superheroes in kind of like a more real world where they're kind of bad people sometimes. Really, really good show. And yeah, no, that's about it.
And you're into that stuff because you're a bit of a comic book guy.
I am a little bit of a comic book guy. Yeah, we can go back there.
We'll touch on that later.
We'll touch on that a little bit later.
That's a fascinating part of the story. So I know CFOs need time to compress. Where do you like to go on vacation, take time off and chill?
Gosh, you know what? My family typically does a vacation at least once a year. There's about 13 of us. My dad sets up the whole thing. You know, he gets to still kind of like maintain his patriarchy over the entire family to do it. The most recent trip we went to was Aruba, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not a very good chilling out on the beach kind of person. I like to be out and about, and so we did another trip through a couple different parts of Asia. And so we were in Hong Kong, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia, and that was just amazing. I mean, it was fantastic for me to just be able to spend a couple, 3 days, you know, in each spot, dragging all of our family members kind of like with us and just getting into like the culture of everything, and frankly, just like learning everything that I can't learn from like Google Images, right? Yeah. So yeah, no, that's been one of my favorite spots recently.
And that was all 13 of the family you dragged them through?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All the nieces, daughters, all of them. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure they had a good time. So.
They better have, yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't the cheapest thing, so yeah, they better.
Probably not.
Makes sense. All right, well, let's kick into business. So for today, you know, the background of this is I was a CPA, I wanted to be a CFO one day, but I'm realizing in founding Flowcast that I really didn't know what a good CFO does. And so that's the purpose of this. So I'd love to just walk through
I think you did fine because you skipped it and went straight to CEO founder.
I did, and it took the CEO role for me to realize that I did not have what it takes to be a CFO. It's kind of a weird contrast. So this is why this has been like very interesting for me to learn about all this. So with that, can we just talk through your career path and things you learned along the way?
How far back do you want to go? You want to go back into the whole comic book
I know
thing
your
as well
story
too?
already, so yes, I would like to go back to like high school.
Okay,
Let's go.
Okay, so I'm going to age myself drastically right now. So out of high school, you know, at 17, turns out that when you go to Catholic school, failing religion's a terrible thing. So I actually didn't get my diploma. I'm not sure if you want everybody to see that, but quickly realized, you know, I needed to do something. You know, I wasn't going to go straight into college, and so I actually started out with a business in kind of like the pop culture space, basically, frankly, selling comic books, toys, cards, all sorts of other things. Did that mostly on the weekends. And then during the week, because that wasn't enough to keep me busy, during the week I actually used to do part-time construction. So literally, you know, 8 hours like digging ditches into the side of a mountain for an add-on to a house. And you know, if we really needed the money, you could do a double from like 6 to midnight, which was at a rock quarry out in Corona. Now, luckily enough, I didn't do it, you know, for that long, but the business that I'd started kind of evolved a couple of different times. It went from, you know, initially just at like, frankly, the swap meet to a mail order company, to a distribution company, and then ultimately into what it is right now, which is 3 physical locations in LA, Claremont, and Redlands. Now, the whole point of me kind of like going through that was to get this thing up to a point where it was operationally and financially self-sufficient so I could get myself back into school. Was able to do that, took about 10 years, got back into school, finished off a couple of degrees in about 3.5 years, and then did a complete 180-degree turn and said, well, I'm going to go into audit and consulting. So went to RSM McGladrey, spent about 5.5 years there. A lot of time in audit. The tail end of that, a little bit more on the consulting side, so a lot of M&A due diligence, a little bit of strategy, process restructuring. That whole industry was still coming off the tail end of SOX, and so we were still picking up like a ton of work like that. And then from there, after about 5.5 years, I think you've just kind of had enough and kind of like paid your dues in audit.
5.5 is pretty good.
I talk to people now. It's like 2 and they bounce, right? And like that's just enough, right? And but as difficult as it was, I think most people that come out of that situation would agree. Like it's a fantastic learning environment. It's just a brutal learning environment, right? And so left there. Got recruited to Disney. I was the finance manager for their studio division at that time. So it was still pre-Lucasfilm buyout, but it's still pretty big. It was about $7 or $8 billion in revenue, and effectively where all the intellectual property for Disney would be created, right? So got to see Avengers being made. Got to see John Carter being written off for $200 million as well too.
Film accounting is fascinating. Stuff.
Yeah. We won't get into that. There's probably a 300-page EY thing to get into film accounting.
I've read it.
That's
great.
I read it and I shudder at the fact that I actually got to the end of it. But and Disney was great as far as culture goes for big companies. It was fantastic. A lot of really, really smart people there. Ultimately, it wasn't really for me because Disney has great systems and great processes. You come in and your job is kind of like this, and just be really good at that. And like you don't need to do anything outside of that box. So it's really tough to have an impact. And also at the end, it kind of felt like 10,000 of us with our pinky on a bus, and it's not like my work wasn't important. I felt like it was, but honestly, I take my pinky off that bus, and the bus is still going to go. Right? Disney is going to go no matter what. From there, I transitioned to Vubiquity, which is a mid-market company, about 250 in rev by the time I got there. I think when I left, it was about 300 million. That one. Ultimately, I ended up being the director of financial reporting there across the entire company. And that was a really good kind of like step from just the finance manager side, because I got to straddle a little bit, be kind of the go-between between accounting and FP&A. So I could understand a little bit better at least what they're doing, even if I wasn't involved in creating what they were doing. From there, I got recruited to Whisper. Which is a B2C.
Can I just go back and touch on the last role? Was that intentional for you? Were you like, hey, I want to learn more about finance. I want to put myself in a position to be bridging these?
Yeah. I mean, it was. What I knew is that I wasn't ready to be a controller, right? And if there's one piece of advice I could give to people is, don't shoot too fast, too far. I see a lot of people reach for that title way too early. It ends up becoming a hindrance. But I did. When I looked at the job description, it was going to give me a purview of the entire company, as opposed to like a specific role within like a specific segment, and also gave me kind of like a little bit more of that cross-functional role across FP&A, which I wanted on my resume as well too.
So I want to like go back to that comment a little bit. The wanting to get promoted really quickly and become a controller is for a lot of people, right? But you just said you weren't ready to be a controller, and that's after going to college, working at EY or working at RSM for 5.5 years, being at Disney. That's doing a lot of stuff, and you're sitting there saying, I'm not ready to be controller. Like what?
No, I mean, I didn't feel like I was ready to be a controller at that point. I think some of the things that were still missing was, frankly, my team that I had over at Disney was pretty small. It was just 2 people, and they were really financial analysts.
Okay.
The pure accounting side was completely on the other side of the building, and so I actually moved away from kind of like the technical aspect of it, right? And so I knew I needed to kind of like get back into that as well, and also, the controller that was there, when I interviewed her, she was fantastic, and definitely, I would say when you're interviewing and trying to decide where you want to work, making sure you pick the right boss is critical. So,
okay, that makes a ton of sense. It's like it's very refreshing to hear. If you don't work for people, if you don't get that experience, you're not going to be great in that role without.
Oh yeah, and you know what, I see it. I used to see it all the time, especially people coming out of audit, that may have been like a couple of years behind me, and they might jump out of the auditor role after like 2 or 3 years and call me up and say, hey, this controllership opened up. at this small company over here, and it's worth X, and you know, and I think that's fine for some people, but if you're going to be shooting a little bit higher than that for a larger company and a larger title, the problem with that is it kind of bottlenecks you and pigeonholes you into a specific role. And I could also say, honestly, from being a hiring manager as well too, when I see people that have jumped to that role too early and then apply for a role within my organization for, say, like an accounting manager, a senior accountant, or a financial analyst, you know, red flags go up, right? I'm always like, wait, well, is that person going to be okay moving down into this role? And because they did that jump, you know, did they pick up all the skill sets that I think that they needed to pick up along the way? And you know, a lot of times the cases that's not the case.
Interesting. So someone has 2 years out of UI, and then they joined some startup on the west side, and they were a controller for 2 years. Startup went out of business. And now they're applying for a senior accountant role for you. And that doesn't line up for you. There's something fishy.
It doesn't always. I mean, sometimes they will. I mean, I've learned, first of all, to try to not get fooled by the logo next to somebody's resume, first of all. And then also cast a really, really wide net, because there's a lot of things that I'm looking for, like in an individual, that isn't always going to be apparent on somebody's resume. And frankly, like really good fit and just wild levels of accountability. And you never see that on a resume. And so I do, you know, occasionally I will give somebody like that opportunity to interview just for me to find out. And if there's a rational story of like why it went that way, and a more rational story about why you would be willing to effectively take a title down, you know, I think that can work. That can still work.
Interesting. So sorry for cutting you off.
Nope.
Whisper?
Nope. So got recruited over to Whisper. I was it's a B2C social company based out of Venice Beach, typical startup, went from like 0 to a $200 million valuation in 2 years, you know, got a big check for their like Series A, and had, you know, blue chip backers like Lightspeed and Sequoia. Now they already had a VP of finance, and he needed to hire a controller. And this was going to be an opportunity for me, if the company was going to grow, to be able to build something completely bespoke, right? And also kind of like build it from the ground up. Plus, you know, our office was Angelica Houston's old house on the beach, and so we had a chef and just all this other silliness. So I took that role, you know, and I think one of the things that I learned from that role compared to coming from Disney and also my prior role at Ubiquity is, especially when you're making that transition to a startup, a lot of things that really mattered to you and mattered to your boss at a Disney or a Ubiquity or art does not matter at startups, right? The only things that really, really do matter, you know, when you're getting to the board level and the investor level, at least for a company like that, is specific milestones. So in their case, it's going to be user counts, and then also just cash. And so I think that was something that I had to kind of like turn off in my head, which was, you know, I wanted to warn people about, oh my God, you don't have capitalized software, you don't have stock-based compensation, and all those things are important, but not as important as getting down into like what is driving growth in the business and what's holding it back. So.
That was unbelievably timely. This afternoon, I was having an argument with our auditors about capitalized software and how it is not a good use of my engineering department's time.
It's not a good use of anybody's time.
We need to minimize the administrative burden of this process, or else I just don't want to capitalize software anymore. Which, as an accountant, that kills me to say I don't want to be GAAP compliant, but it's just not worth it for the business.
I don't think it's worth it for the business, and frankly, I would challenge you to find any investor that's looking at an S1 or anything else that is making a decision based on what they're looking at in capitalized software, and the truth is it's none of them.
Challenge not accepted. There's nobody.
There's nobody. And it also, in my mind, also kind of takes the P&L further away from like true cash activity, which frankly is a lot more important, at least at that level, right? So, so from there, you know, the business didn't hit the milestones that they needed to. I ended up getting recruited over to Grindr, which is a gay dating app. The first mobile dating app, frankly, in my mind, to come out in the world, March 2009. And I think by the time I got there, it was still pretty small. It was roughly about 47 or 48 people. They had just sold a good chunk of the company for about, I think, a valuation about like 155. And I can say this stuff because it's all public information anyways. And I came in as a controller. Now, what was really opportune about, you know, going into that company was that they were already at roughly, I think like $40 million a year, had no FP&A, no finance. Everything was still like outsourced to this little like bookkeeping firm out in New Jersey. And so even though I was coming in as the controller, there was still basically a complete gap in like all of the other finance skill sets that should be there, right? So no FP&A, nothing. And so that gave me an opportunity to kind of like take on those roles and add those bullet points onto my resume and basically build the entire thing from the ground up. Long story short, by the time I left the company, as a VP of Finance and Strategy, we were able to exit the rest of the company to a buyer for about 2.5 times what it was when I first got there. So that turned out to be a good exit for most everybody. I stuck around a little bit longer. Ultimately, the values, and I need to be careful here, the value system of the new level of management didn't line up with mine, and so we ended up parting ways, right? And at that point, I was going to go on this little like eat, pray, love thing for about 2 or 3 months, and then you guys contacted me.
I remember. So that was around the time where our VP of Finance had departed, and we were interviewing interim candidates. And frankly, I remember getting your resume and thinking like, okay, it's a lot of consumer. How does Grindr play into this, right? And then we hopped on the phone and we're going through the interview, and you're running me through the business model and everything you did, and how you were prepping for how you would really thoughtfully prepped for an exit and had done all that. I was super impressed, and the parallels to our company were actually much stronger than I would have expected.
There's a lot more than you would have thought. And I think that's, first of all, like that's a really strong advantage from like coming from the accounting and FP&A side, is that what we do is very transferable, right? Now, if you've been spending 20 years in banking or healthcare, and you're getting deep into like technical expertise on that, it might be a little bit harder to transition out. But I think when you're going from like, especially at like a startup stage and like private companies, you can do a little bit of hopping around. I don't think it's necessarily like specific industry expertise that you need to bring with you, as much as it is a thought process to understand that business as fast as you quickly can. So,
That makes sense. As you look back on your career, was there like one person you worked for, you view as a mentor, someone you really learned a lot from?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So my first audit manager out of RSM was Amy Schumacher. Brilliant, learned a lot from her. I think, honestly, the one thing I probably benefited from more than anything else is that she just trusted me, right, with a lot of things. And so, within, I think it was like 9 months after I had gotten into RSM, she effectively let me run an engagement, right, on my own. I mean, it wasn't a huge one, but she trusted me with that. And once you get to that point, you can just take off running and start scooping up more and more things and picking up more skill sets that you otherwise wouldn't have. And if I had to give any kind of advice to somebody that's trying to move up the ladder, and it doesn't need to be CPA all the way to CFO, you need to think about the steps that get you there, is your first job, your only job, is to make your boss look good. Start there. And the best way to go about doing that is whatever the JD is in front of you and the bullet points and everything, just crush those. Do those really, really well. If you don't do those things, it's really tough to find a boss that's going to trust you with the other thing that's right around the corner that you haven't touched on yet. So.
Like kind of the beauty about the real world and working in the real world is it's merit based, and if you're crushing it for your boss and you're making them look great, they're not going to want you to go anywhere, and you're going to have all kinds of opportunities within your organization.
No,
yeah, it's super interesting. So back to the entrepreneurial side of you. So like a lot of people, they want to go to college, work a little bit, and then become an entrepreneur. Like that's that's the route I took, right? But you almost said it out of necessity. It was like, I got to make some money. I got to be an entrepreneur, and then I want to go have my career, my professional career after that. So like, how do you think all that entrepreneurship during your late teens, early 20s helped play into the rest of your career?
I think there's probably 2 or 3 things I could point to that I got out of that. First of all is a pretty healthy respect for like all the disciplines within a business, as opposed to accountants think there's nothing more important than the financials of a company, and it is critically important, but marketing and operations and everything else is wildly important too. And I think you need to learn. What it forced me to do is if I couldn't become an expert at everything, I needed to get at least 15 or 20% of the way there, because otherwise, if you do end up becoming, an entrepreneur like you with a company this size, you hire people that are subject matter experts in those particular verticals, but it's tough to know whether or not they're doing the right thing, or it's tough to even have conversations with them, right? If you don't know at least 10 or 15% of what it is you're doing. I think the other thing that I got out of it was a lot of, frankly, just like self-discipline. When I opened up the stores and I had the distribution company, a lot of times it was just me. And it wasn't going to work if I didn't put in 60, 70, 80 hours a week. That's just it, right? And so you learn to really force yourself, and you develop a lot of grit to get through all those things. And so that's been pretty helpful for me going through this, just realizing that you need to step up and just do all the other things nobody else is willing to make themselves do if you want to grow at that pace.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm going to toot your horn a little bit here. I feel like working with you was my first, wow, I'm working with a CFO experience.
Okay.
And what made it feel that way was you were so broadly thinking about the business.
Yeah.
You weren't just living in a financial model or talking to accounting and that was it, here are the numbers.
And you're an auditor. I'm not going to talk to you about that stuff. No, but Mike doesn't want to know about it.
I don't, that's true. I've heard enough about it, but I remember having conversations about really pragmatic decisions of hey, this might not be the best thing for cash or forecasting, but this is what we have to do to propel the business.
Yeah.
It was just a different way of thinking that, as I reflect on it, it feels like it was very much driven by your entrepreneur background, and just getting how a business runs.
Yeah, I think that was probably a little bit of it, and I think frankly, this is going to be a struggle for a lot of CPAs and a lot of accountants, is that we're accustomed to looking at a number on a set of financial statements and looking at a piece of paper and saying that's why that number is what it is, right? So if you were to come to me and say, hey, what was revenue this month? And you'd never ask me that because all you care about is ARR, which is a non-GAAP number anyways. But if you did happen to ask me what revenue this was, and I was still thinking in just that accounting mode, I would say, well, I have this sales order, this invoice, and a bunch of these, and I'm going to marry this with the technical GAAP guidance, and that's how we came up to that number.
Yeah.
And I think where accountants have a little bit of struggle is conflating that piece of paper, which is an outcome or evidence, as opposed to a driver, right, of that number. And so I think making that transition into the FP&A side of things and getting very operational about those things means ignore that piece of paper and understand what got you to that outcome anyways, and realize that it's a lot of people's choices, decisions, actions, or frankly inactions, right, that develop that. And the classic, the easiest way we can point to is the typical sales funnel, right? And if you manage the sales funnel, it doesn't matter about the piece of paper at the end of the day. If you manage every single one of those steps, it should spit out a predictable number at the end of the day, right? Which is what the high multiples of a SaaS business is built on.
Yeah.
So.
And that was a big thing that you focused on here. Is you were, let's dig into the funnel and the pipeline and look at what are the conversion rates all the way down? How do we tweak these and improve? And I was very impressed with that.
And it's interesting. I actually brought that over from Grindr because we did a lot of heavy cohort analysis.
Yeah, I remember talking
when
about
it comes in.
Yeah.
And now we're going to go into the real wonky, nerdy data side. The problem with looking at a static funnel is it's not longitudinal, and there's a time element to it.
Yep.
As opposed to when you look at it from a B2C side, we know there's a time element to those things, and when you get to B2B, that time element's even longer.
Yep.
And so not only are you looking at conversion rates, you're looking at, is it 1 month out, 2 months out, 3 months out. And if you want to drive business, then ultimately you have two variables to increase that, right? Which is both speed and also the conversion rates all the way down.
Yeah. So I think it's important to note that we have a CFO and we're talking about sales and pipeline and funnel and all that stuff. That's the breadth of the role, is to really think about the whole business, and you need to know it to interpret the data. This is something we've been focused on a lot lately. Is we have all this data and we have these numbers, and you want to make decisions on the data, but you need to know the story. You need the story behind the data, right? Us, for example, we've gone through a lot of tweaks in our sales organization, and so should we really be relying on the data for the last 6 months? It feels like that was a conversation you and I had quite a bit, is what's changed in the business and how does that reflect in the data?
And is it still relevant? Does that make the historical stuff still relevant? No, I think that's key, and I also think of going back to the transition from CPA to a CFO is being able to have that like non-financial discussion with you about like what it exactly is kind of creating those outcomes. And those are the things that you can actually push levers on, as opposed to, again, like kind of going back to the piece of paper. Now, that's not to say that document is not an important thing. It's evidence, and anybody that has an accounting or audit background knows, hey, my goal at least once a year is to get the freaking auditors out of my building, and the only way we the only way we can do that is with those pieces of paper. And so, this isn't to minimize at all like the importance of the accounting function. It is always going to be a garbage in, garbage out scenario, and if they don't get it right, for certain everything else after that is wrong, right? And I think the other thing you kind of like pointed to, brought up a little bit, was where frankly, and this is not just a CPA thing, this is an FP&A thing as well too, is we can get to like a specific number with this wildly complex model of like 27 tabs, and we might want you to see it and see all the work. And once you get to kind of like a C level, or even not even like a C level, is when you're cross-functional and interdisciplinary, the people you're trying to communicate that to have no idea what the hell any of that stuff is, and frankly, they don't care, right? And what I would always tell people is like, great, this all makes sense to me because I've done it, and I can nerd out on this data. But if I wasn't the audience and it's somebody else, what are the 3 most important takeaways out of this thing? And then just hard stop right there, right? And kind of like let your audience guide you, and ideally, if you're a CFO, your audience is going to be the CEO or other people that are across the the other departments in the company. So.
And that's really important. The rest of the executives might not be as financially literate as the CFO, and so you need to play on their level, basically.
And frankly, your board may not be either, right?
That's very true.
And even if they are, they may not have the patience.
Nor do they care about all the details, right?
It's really
not necessarily important for them.
No. They writing the 12-page memo to make sure you got stock-based compensation. Totally, you do need to do that. Not saying don't do that. Absolutely critical for a well-functioning accounting department. Doesn't mean anything to anybody else, honestly. But you still need to do those things.
One of the things that you did here was you hired some really great people. Like Greg, our controller, is awesome.
Good.
We have Tom, our senior accountant. He's amazing. Kevin has been killing it. Arvin is great on the FP&A team. So like, when you're hiring, when you're recruiting, when you're hiring, just like tell us more. Tell me more about that. How did you find these people? Why is our accounting and finance so good right now?
I would say that like, so you need to get past whatever the statement is on the resume, because people are obviously, and you should do this on your resume, is it should be a bragging sheet, right? What I'm really interested in is how you actually got to that thing, right? Because a lot of times people will put that on their resume, and you start digging into the details, and it turns out maybe they're not so good at that thing. Arvin, in particular, I got on the phone with that guy, and the first like 20 minutes he rattled off this entire like sales funnel to me. Right away, that told me he came prepared, right? Because he didn't come from a B2B SaaS background at all, right? I think they come from Live Nation.
It was, I think EY and then Live Nation.
Completely different. That guy showed up prepared. From what I heard, somebody else in the company may have prepped him totally fine. He still took it seriously.
That was Kevin.
Was it Kevin that prepped him?
Kevin got coached, which is totally fine. Kevin's awesome. Kevin's great. I don't care. So is Arvin, but
totally fine. And then, again, like the other thing that I want to look for is just like wild levels of accountability, right? So meaning, if you accomplished whatever this thing was, right? Why did you go about doing it? Right? Why was it even important? And who helped you along the way? Or better yet, if no one helped you along the way and you just Googled your way to it, that's even better, right? For me, because I love it when people come to me with a problem but a proposed solution that they've taken the time to kind of figure it out. It's okay if your solution might suck a little bit. I'm here to stop it at me, right? That's totally fine. But at least you're not putting it on me to kind of come up with the solution for you. And I think when people do that, I see a wild distinction between people that want to be taught and people that want to learn. And the people that want to learn go and figure it out themselves. They absorb it because they probably went through a lot of pain of several hours of getting all that information in their head, as opposed to somebody that would prefer to have the answer like given to them.
Okay, so that's definitely going to be a clip we rip out for the Instagram preview, is learning versus being taught. That is fascinating.
Totally different
You're
things.
so spot on with that. That
Totally
is very,
different
very
things.
different. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I try.
Awesome. All right.
I learned how to open up a comic book store. I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yeah, totally. Figuring it out, right?
figure it out,
I
yeah.
talk about that
Yeah.
a lot with entrepreneurship. Is the ability to figure stuff out is so important.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I went to UCLA, got my MBA. Great classes, amazing academic rigor. A lot of people that want to become an entrepreneur, a lot of times, frankly, you'll come out of that going, I'm still not sure how to be an entrepreneur on this thing. And my advice to them is like, just go try it.
Just do it.
It's fine. Just go try it. Do it.
To rip off the Nike logo.
Just do it. Totally. Yeah.
Well, okay. Now Waggle. So you left Flowcast. You broke my heart, and you went to Waggle. So tell me more about they are earlier stage.
Yep.
So it's different dynamics. So tell me more about that company, how things have been going, and what you've been doing over there.
Yeah, no, things have been going really, really well. I think just to give you kind of like the 30-second elevator pitch. So Waggle is kind of like the leading platform in the employee voice and collective feedback category. So if you think about how you might want to either increase engagement or increase inclusion or source innovation out of a company, basically what we do is we give you a tool that allows you to have like conversations at scale. It's completely anonymous, so it democratizes ideas. So that way, if you have a 10 or 15,000 person organization, instead of ideas coming from the top and being pushed down, you can source ideas and innovation and sentiment and bring it up. And I think it's an absolute truth that you can remove execution risks when the ideas and the strategies that you're trying to push forward are coming from the people that are actually closest to the data and closest to the customers, as opposed to you trying to come up with those ideas for them, right?
Executing their own ideas.
Executing their own ideas, right? And it is earlier stage. We finished the Series A in 2018. We're thinking about our Series B and kind of like what that means. A little bit different from Flowcast. The primary buyer is the head of human resources.
Okay.
And that whole tech stack I just didn't know at all, aside from payroll connects to my GL system, thank God, and I don't want it to be wrong, and I've gone into the occasional applicant tracking system, but it was something that was really, really interesting to me. Met with the people there, loved all of them. They're all mission-driven people, and I think it's going to be a great outcome for us. I think what's interesting is that I kind of see the evolution of, if you're a younger guy, so I don't know how much you were involved in like the search engine wars of like 2000, right? And
kinda. I would have been. I was like investing in stock in high school, right around the crash time. So I would have had some idea of this going on.
I think the parallel I would draw is that right around like 97, 98, you had 50 players that were all competing in the search space, whether it was like Lycos, WebCollar, AltaVista, and they were founded on two principles. One, the way they were aggregating data and bringing the most relevant thing to you as the searcher was through like natural language processors, word counts, algorithms, and the other principle was to keep somebody on the page as long as possible, right? Because they were completely ad driven.
Yeah.
And then this little company called Google came out and effectively brought in crowdsourcing into it by saying, okay, like those algorithms probably matter, but we're gonna work on clicks and links and basically what does the rest of the ecosystem think of that particular page to define its relevance. And I think we're kind of the same way right now, where your typical engagement measurement platform is exactly that. It's kind of like the bathroom scale versus the actual fitness program. It's one way, it's not transparent. And there's a ton of people in that space right now that's getting very crowded and very noisy. But it's still growing. It's still growing really, really fast. And our position is that the evolution of that is that your people probably don't wake up any single morning wanting to fill out a survey and feeling like they're part of a research project. That does not make them more engaged. What they do is they want to have a voice in something. They want to be part of a conversation, and they want to be able to contribute to whatever the strategic direction is of the company. And then again, that kind of goes back to if you can participate in that, you're more likely to execute that. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. Very, very cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap with, this has been an awesome conversation. I think a really, really interesting thing to think about is like, if you were to hire your replacement, what would that look like? Because it is very much like you want to leave a good legacy and you want to hire a great replacement. So if you were, if you went to your CEO and you said, hey, this has been great, I'm looking to move on to a new opportunity though, I want to transition things the right way. Like what would you be looking for in a candidate? What skills matter to you?
Yeah, so I think, let me tell you who the candidate's not first. Let's do that. I think somebody that, CFOs, there's a distinction between like public and private CFOs. There's also a distinction in my mind. I think the way I want to describe it is the CFO that helps you sell the thing, helps you sell the amazing house that you built, and the CFO that likes to build the house, right? And I'm much more along this side of things where I kind of like to be the architect and the contractor, kind of like putting things together. And my philosophy is if you build an amazing house, selling it is not a problem later on down the road, right? And so if I were to think of, kind of block chunking the role into three things, which is, accounting, FP&A and operations, and kind of like the capital and fundraising side. The company that I'm right now, this is probably the most important piece, because just like any other startup, you've got data integrity issues that come up, right? You've got operational issues that come up as well too. I would also frankly want somebody that fits in with the culture there. It's a really, really good culture. People very much believe in kind of like the mission there. And, I think as much as we get played on as just like the numbers people, that's not the kind of person I would want. I would want in that building, kind of like backing me up. Also, if they're coming from a role where they might have had 20 people or 30 people reporting to them and a lot of systems and processes, that person should also understand and frankly be eager to build something from the ground up and keep building that, because that's what you're going to be doing. I mean, in the role right now, I am FP&A, right?
So it's very stage specific. I mean,
very
based on
stage
where you
specific
are today, and then presumably when you cross 100 million of ARR, recurring revenue, that profile changes.
Totally. And you know what I mean? It's whether it's Flowcast or Waggle or anybody else, if any company that becomes the $20 billion publicly held company, I'm not the right person for that. I probably don't really want to be
that's a very important level of self-awareness to have, right? Like what do you actually enjoy doing, and what do you want to do with your career?
I think so. I mean, and you bring up a good point is it's really easy to look at a title on Indeed and say like, I want that, and I want to be at a company. But if you don't spend time to really think deeply about like, what does that mean to actually be in that seat? It's really important to kind of like weed those away and just say like, don't waste any of your time on those things. So,
definitely. Okay, well, I've enjoyed this conversation. Any like final parting advice or tidbits for our audience you think would be helpful?
You know what? Yeah, I mean, there's probably two or three things, right? If you want to, and this is just general kind of like career advancement rules, not necessarily like making that leap from like CPA to CFO. One, I'll reiterate, crush what you're doing right now. If the most important thing that you're doing is like just within the accounting scope, it's three things. It's accurate, timely, salient information. Hard stop. Don't make it any more complicated than that. The other things that you're doing are wildly complicated, but they're not necessarily a value add to the audience outside of the accounting group. And then the other thing that I would say is, once you're able to kind of like crush those things, is try to reduce as much time as you are spending time on those things, especially the things that you can automate. Obviously, closed management, Flowcast. If you can carve a couple days out of the month, from your typical process, it's 24 days over the year. Those are the kind of like times where you can take the opportunity to reach for like other things to add to those bullet points. I would also say whatever job you're in right now, think about the next job you want to be at. Right now, go to Indeed, go to LinkedIn, pull down those JDs, check the boxes you have checked, look at the things that you're missing. That's your next 2-year career plan. Just find that stuff, right? And if you find yourself stuck in a position where those opportunities aren't there, you may want to look. That's it. So
awesome.
So I'd leave everybody with.
Well, thank you so much. I hope the audience found value from this one. I did. I've heard the story, but I love hearing it again and the additional details. So thank you so much, Lee, for joining us today. Can I have a handshake and a hug?
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it, dude.